This is part 5 of chapter 1, Introduction and Research Methods. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at descriptive research. Remember, this is about naturalistic type of observations, being able to use surveys as well as case studies. Now, when we're talking about naturalistic observations, the chief advantage of using a naturalistic observation is that researchers they can obtain data about natural behaviors rather than about behavior that is a reaction to some type of artificial experimental situation. However, naturalistic observation can be difficult as well as time consuming, and the lack of the control by this researcher it can make it difficult to conduct the observations of behavior that would occur infrequently. So, if a researcher wants to observe a behavior in a more controlled setting, such as a lab, uh, then there's many advantages of naturalistic observation. But with greater control, uh, but with having greater control over the different variables. Now, in terms of surveys, the one key advantage of surveys is that they can gather data from a much larger sample of participants that's possible with other research methods. Unfortunately, though, most surveys would rely on self-reported data, and as I mentioned earlier, self-reported data is not the most reliable at times because not all participants will be completely honest. Additionally, when it comes to survey techniques, the techniques cannot, of course, be used to explain the causes of behaviors. Uh, so you hope to get good data, but there's times it won't happen that way. Now, when we speak about case studies, you have to keep in mind that with case studies, they have their own type of research limits, including the possible lack of being able to generalize the data, or it could be inaccurate or biased based upon recall among participants. And usually, when we're talking about a case study, it's a small sample. It can be as small as one individual. Okay. Now, speaking about correlational research, here again, this is when we may be looking at two or more variables and do it through observations, or it can be measured, but it's not directly manipulated in order to be able to identify any type of relationships between the variables. Now, this is the moment I want you to stop the video after I speak and just take a look at this and absorb it for yourselves. Um, and think about when we're speaking about relationships between the variables. Here, this is where your reading comes in. Make sure you read on this section, but we're speaking about correlation coefficients. And they're calculated by the formula that will produce numbers between 1 to 1, both positive 1 as well as negative 1. Uh, these will be the strongest possible relationships. As the number decreases, it'll get more closer to the 0 point. And if it's closer to the 0 point, then more or less it's kind of weak. All right. Um, it'll help to explain why the correlational research really doesn't allow us to determine cause and effect. That gives examples in terms of experimental research. Variables in question would be talking about how, for example, how the performance of exams might be. But when we're looking at a direction of relationship, you're looking at whether or not there's a positive correlation. And this would mean that basically the two variables would move or vary within the same direction of one another, which means that it can either increase or decrease together. Negative correlations is going to say that they're going in opposite directions. All right, so now We've absorbed a little of the information about correlational and experimental research. Let's try to start distinguishing between the two. So for what I would like for you to do, this would actually be a class activity, but take time to uh, pause the video, and I would like for you to attempt to read this. Again, this is not part of the first assignment, but this is something that would help you to kind of learn and maintain that material that you're gathering during your studies. Now let's talk a little bit about biological research. The earliest explorers of the brain dissected the brain of deceased humans and conducted experiments on other animals by using lesion techniques. Early researchers, they basically relied on clinical observations as well as case studies of living people who had experienced injuries. They may have had diseases as well as other type of disorders that affected brain functioning. Today, more modern researchers are now employing new techniques that would help to examine biological processes that underline our behavior. Most of these type of methods are relatively non-invasive. So remember, biological research is the scientific study of the brain as well as the other parts of the nervous system. Sorry for the pause. All right, continuing on. Here, let's take a look at some of the different research methods within the biological construct. You have electrical type recordings, you have EEGs, uh, we also have CTs, which is the computed tomography scan, uh, positron emission tomography scans or the PET scans. Pretty much these are the three different types that we would use as far as like when we want to study the brain. When we go back to the EEG, here this is using electrodes that they'll attach to either your skin or up toward the scalp to kind of start reading brain activity. Okay, most times what they utilize this for is to see where it's most active within the brain while you're doing particular tasks or mental states. And we'll talk about states of consciousness later on in chapter 5. But it helps to also look for any type of abnormalities within the brain waves that can demonstrate and show different malfunctions of the brain. Those being like if someone may be epileptic or may possess a tumor within them. So that's what they would use EEGs for. Whereas with a CT, this is more of like an X-ray where it's doing more cross-sectional type of scanning of the brain or other parts of the body. It doesn't have to be just the brain. This will produce what we see as a 3D image, and it's more inexpensive than using some of the other type of imaging that's like MRIs, and we'll talk about those. But yeah, those are expensive. Um, However, what helpful things CTs can do is it can help to determine whether a person may be having a stroke, if they have any internal type of injuries, any kind of tumors, as well as other type of brain disorders. And the PET scan, this is more radioactive, and it's utilizing where they place glucose within the bloodstream, and they look from the scanner to see if there's any glucose used to act any of the active areas in the brain that would be producing some more computer type constructed pictures. Again, this would help us to see and dissect whether there's any type of abnormalities within the brain itself. All right, now you heard me mention MRIs, which is one of the more expensive. And I mean, when I say expensive, it can run up into the cost of at least $10,000 per uh, imaging session. So this one is where it's looking at more of the fissures as well as internal structures. And early on, they've gotten better with it. Early on, it was like a big giant cigar tube in which the patient would be placed within it, and It usually took about 30 minutes, and it used to have this loud clunking, and I can express and explain it because I've had one way back when they first came out. It was extremely claustrophobic. I had feelings of claustrophobia because it was extremely closed in, and you had this knocking experience the entire time. However, what it did was it had these electromagnets that would help to produce these high frequency magnetic fields that would pass through the brain. And it came up with providing more high resolution type three-dimensional pictures of the brain. And that, of course, would help greatly in terms of seeing if there's any type of abnormalities within the brain. They help to map the different brain structures as well as the functioning of the brain. Now, MRIs have also been used throughout the entire body. It's not just the brain itself, but they have been able to use it in other parts of the body as well. With the fMRI, this is more of that functional magnetic resonance imaging, and this is the more faster type version, which it'll pick up blood flow as well as magnetic signals from the blood that help to show the oxygen even. This helps in terms of not only just seeing the blood flow, but how it affects the brain in different areas. You'll be able to see any type of inactivity as well as activity in the brain. Um, it would even be able to pick up things, whereas they can ask a patient a question, and when the patient answers the question, it will register and show within the brain. So it's kind of really cool. Of course, there's other different methods in which they might utilize taking cells and studying cells through the microscope. Um, there's micro injections as well as intrabrain electrical recordings. So pretty much we've gotten to where we want to talk about how good study habits, how we can help students be more successful in studying, not here only to field of psychology, as in general psychology, but through all your different studies. Okay? Familiarization is when you allow yourself to familiarize yourself with general text so that you can take full advantage of the contents. You might take notes. You can look at the many different tables and figures as well as photographs. There might be special information. Like if you take a look at your textbook, you'll notice that they have these little feature boxes, which would help to enhance your understanding on the particular subject matter. You might utilize active reading. So a lot of times, I don't know about you, but when I read, I'm one of those individuals that actually need to hear myself. So I might read aloud. Although I can read silently, actually hearing myself is more useful for me. But we tell our brain to slow down and we start to focus more on details. And this is when we start to save some of the material so that we can recall it later on in the future. Um, uh, One method of reading actively is what they call the SQ4R method. Okay, and this means survey, question, read, and then recite, and then review, and then write. Now, when I was attending school and grad school, and I was preparing and studying for a test, what would I do? I would look over the material first, okay, and that's that survey component. Then I would ask myself questions about what I just read. Did I understand what I just read? If I can answer that question right, then I would read it again to ensure that I got the information correctly. I then would start reciting the material that I read, okay? Once I did that, I reviewed everything over again, and then I would write it. And I mean, I literally would write almost everything over. It helps to lock it in for future recall. Okay, what you're doing is you're working toward placing that information from short-term memory into long-term memory. And yes, this is another area that you will talk about, and that I believe will be in chapter 7. So we'll talk about that again later on down the line. Now, A lot of us, most times when it comes time to examinations, we kind of procrastinate and wait to the last minute for studying. And research has demonstrated that that's not always the best way to study. Okay, what we like to suggest is that you might distribute your studies. And basically, what you're doing is you're going to learn your material more thoroughly if you can distribute it over time instead of trying to cram it all in at one time. Okay, overlearning. This is when, especially when you have a lot of key terms that you have to memorize definitions for and be able to understand concepts and how they relate to one another. Most times we utilize overlearning. So you want to be able to generate examples other than the ones that would be in the text. Once you read an example, come up with one of your own. This is part of that process of overlearning. You want to hit it, and make it your own. Make it your own in the sense that you've now been able to relate to the material within like your everyday life experiences. By repeatedly reviewing this material, you'll firmly lock it into place, and that's going to be really important, especially if you suffer from test anxiety. Okay, if you are like me, because I don't care for taking exams either. But what I try to do is I prepare myself as best as possible, and I do utilize these four techniques that's been placed before you on this slide. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Um, One thing I like to also mention that's helpful, that helped me with studying. I would study at least up until an hour before going to sleep. Okay, believe it or not, our brains continue to work even when we go to sleep. And basically, it takes everything that we did, especially right before going to sleep, and it looks and starts to filter and try to understand what is it that I need to keep? Is this something that I need to work with? And it helps you to lock it into that long-term memory. So when you go to study, try to make sure you study. Again, you want to distribute the studies, but try to do it right before going to sleep, and you'll be amazed just how much you'll be able to maintain. All right, so looking more at types of strategies, let's look at visual learning, okay? Our brains, they're highly tuned to these visual cues as well as verbal cues, okay? Being able to utilize photographs, drawings, as well as other type of graphic information can help you to solidify your understanding, as well as be able to organize and be able to internalize this new material. Um, you'll be able to see and recognize more patterns. You'll be able to look more into the relationships and how they connect, be able to think creatively. So be sure to kind of pay attention to those photographs and drawings and diagrams that you see in the text, because they will actually help to lock this information in. Here's another tip I have for you that will help you with studying. And yes, I like to share some experiences uh, that hopefully can help you along the way. I used to study with music. Now, not everybody can do it, but I used to, when I studied, play my favorite songs that I already knew by heart, and I would play them while I learned the material. Then, when it was time to take the test, if I was feeling a little anxious or nervous, within my head, I would start humming the song or singing the song, and it would actually help me to start recalling the material that I learned. So hopefully that would help. But a big uh, component to studying is time management. And so much of us, again, procrastination takes over. One of the things you want to try your best to do is to establish a baseline. See how you're studying. You want to be able to record how much time you spend. Is it for 1 week or 2 weeks? Look at how you do your study, what kind of study habits you have, and jot them down. Just create a little journal for yourself. Then set up a realistic schedule. All right. So when I say set up a schedule, you're taking maybe 5 to 6 classes, some even 7. That's a lot of different courses that you're taking, and you need to be able to commit time to learning the material. A lot of us, again, we try to do last minute, and then we want to know why we're walking away with a C or D rather than that A or B. So make sure you set a schedule for yourself. Mondays you might start working on general psychologies. You might put 2 courses a day, general psychology, and if you're taking an English course, you might utilize those two. If you find, oh, and if you do have courses that kind of are similar in nature, like say for example you're a social work major and you're doing general psychology as well as taking a social work course, you might want to try to use the two at the same time because there might be some terminology that's quite similar, which will also help you to recall information. So you can make a daily and weekly to-do list, kind of help keep you on track of things. Create a daily schedule of activities that would include time for all of your activities. Put it within that to-do list and then check things off. Now, there are times you're not going to meet everything on your to-do list, and that's okay. But you want to kind of make sure you're working realistically. So if you know you're not going to get through 10 different items for the day, then don't set yourself up for failure. Make sure you can actually commit to doing the particular things on your to-do list. And if that means that you're only able to complete 5 actions, work at that for now until you can build it up. All right. So with all of that, you work really hard. And one of the things we fail to do is reward ourselves. One of the ways you can reward yourself is give yourself some immediate, tangible type of rewards that would help with sticking to that daily schedule. Okay? When you can say, pick your favorite thing. Now, like for me, I might want to create a doll. I like making dolls. I like art. So, a reward for myself may be that once I complete my readings and my studies or work, then I'm going to give myself an hour, 2 hours time to be able to do something I like to do that I enjoy doing and reward myself. You can find that you might reward yourself with other things that's tangible, something that you can grab yourself. Okay, you're preparing to get ready for exams, say midterms, for example. If you put yourself on this schedule and you work diligently, you might have seen a new top. You might have seen a new gadget of some sort that you really wanted. And if you're able to afford it, then go ahead. If you complete your task in a timely manner, treat yourself to it. This actually helps to boost your morale and give you motivation to be able to, and we'll talk about motivation and emotion. As you see, it's going to come all around. But this will help boost you up to continue doing that type of study. Finally, maximize that time. Try to minimize the amount of time you spend fretting and prepping to study. That's that procrastination I kept speaking about. Just get started. Uh, and yeah, sometimes you might want to go more for the challenging things rather than hit the easy things first. Sometimes you tackle that challenging item first and leave the easy stuff to the end so that when you get through, it's like, oh, okay, I'm good. Okay, so you want to be able to do that, but be alert for those hidden time opportunities. You want to be able to spare the moments that normally would go to waste, but that you can actually use to be more productive. You're more productive when you're able to focus on one task at a time. A lot of times we multitask and we're thinking we're doing great. We're doing 10 different things at one time. Believe it or not, that's not the best method to utilize. You want to try to focus on one thing at a time. So if you have 5 exams midterm week, then when you go to study, study one section at a time. Have an understanding on it before you move to the next course. All right. So hopefully that helps somewhat. Now, I just told you about multitasking and how it could be limiting. But I would usually have a little video for you to watch, but pretty much just look at page 27 and then read the summary on it, okay? And you can pause here, do that, go to your textbook, and read more about it, and then answer the questions that you have in front of you, that being about a hypothesis, the type of research method used, um, as well as being able to do the labeling of independent variable, dependent variable, in the experimental method, looking at the descriptive method, whether or not it's naturalistic observations, case studies. But take a moment and pause the video and just for yourself read up on this particular area and be able to answer and start applying those different strategies that I just mentioned in the last slide. All right. So here, these are just different videos that's available at the website for Wiley. However, most times if you don't sign up for the additional text, you're not able to access that multimedia. So I will just express and say that you can also go on YouTube and look up these different areas and you'll find information about that to help with additional learning. All right, so pretty much we are at the end of chapter 1. I will be providing you with, you will be able to see these slides separately in Canvas so that you can return back and look at the slides individually if you would like. But you will also now be going to take care of the assignment. Great news about the videos, they're going to be available. The video lecture is going to be available whenever. However, I do want to remind you that your first assignment is going to be due on the 22nd. Yes, that fast. So hopefully you see this and I will make an announcement on when it's due. Assignments are going to be due on Thursdays. Okay. However, the assignment will be open until Saturday. So you'll have an opportunity to do it. If you do not do it by Thursday, it will be considered late, which would be considered late to class. And that can be detrimental to your overall grade in participation and attendance. So please make sure that you complete this in a timely manner. But it will disappear after that Saturday. So please make sure that you get it done because as a reminder, there are no makeups for assignments. So once it closes out, I leave it open an extra couple of days because sometimes life happens and there's times you're not going to be able to get it all done. And I do understand that. However, try your best, but realize that on Saturdays, the assignment part of this chapter and module will lock on a Saturday, okay? Which in this case, for this first one, would mean August 24th. Hope you have a great week. Uh, I will make available chapter 2 the following week. More than likely it'll be ready and available by that Saturday so that it'll be open for you to start studying and reading earlier. But don't wait for me. Make sure that you're reading ahead of time. You do have the textbook and you'll be able to. Okay? So on that note, enjoy your day and talk to you soon.